Hey everybody, what's up? It's Wednesday here. Welcome to the show, Round the Nation, right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this wonderful afternoon. We got a lot of good stories we're going to talk about on the show today, so buckle up. Interesting stuff. We're going to talk about Trump and the press. I'm going to have a controversial opinion on that. We're also going to talk about North Korea. We actually have some good news on that. Gina Haspel in the CIA director nomination. I'm going to talk about that. Michael Cohen. So we got a little bit of Stormy Daniels in here, but not too much. We have Illinois police threatening to kill dogs. I'm not kidding. That is a disastrous story. And I'm going to tell you what it's really about. And then we also have a very important net neutrality vote that will happen fairly soon. So, all that stuff, fun show, lots of stuff to talk about, interesting topics. So, we'll get into it. But before we do, I want to remind everybody to please give us a like, give us a share. Very, very important. Share wherever you can. Sharing is caring. That's what helps us out the most right now. So, there are other ways to help, of course. Use a super chat. That's how you can not only support the show, but also send us messages or send me messages that I will read on the air. As, of course, that's a way for you to be involved in the show. So you can use it to ask like questions or comment or to raise something that you would like me to address. All that stuff, that's what you can use the super chat for. So I think it's a really, really cool tool, and it's really powerful. So, all right. That said, also, you can support the show by being a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That also goes to continue, or to help us continue to keep running. So, and to keep doing the show. So that helps us out, as I said, a great deal. All right, everybody. I guess before we get into this stuff, I do want to address some of the primaries yesterday. So some important primaries. I was really watching Ohio, and I was watching West Virginia. So Ohio, of course, Dennis Kucinich, he did not do well. Did not go well for progressives in Ohio. Richard Cordray, of course, overwhelmingly won the nomination. He's going to go against a Republican. So that sucks. That's sad. I was hoping Kucinich would be able to pull it out. He would have made a pretty good governor. But unfortunately, that did not happen. Look, Cordray's not bad. He's been pretty tough in the banks, so you got to give him his due on that. So, yeah, he's still takes corporate PAC money. That sucks, but it's not quite as bad as it could be. So, again, we had somebody who was very, very tough on Wall Street, tough on the banks. So, at least there's that. I'm trying to find the good side to this. What was actually a fairly disappointing race last night? Another disappointing race this time was, and this is really disappointing, West Virginia. So you had Paula Jean Swearengin. Her campaign was pretty much about, hey, we deserve clean water. Well, everybody deserves clean water. We're the richest country in the world. What do you mean that there are places that don't have clean water or clean air? Well, that's unfortunately the case in West Virginia. So Paula Jean Swearengin took on the establishment, the corporate Democrat, actually should be more of a Republican, Joe Manchin, and she did not win in that race. She had absolutely no media coverage. Obviously, she doesn't take corporate PAC money. She's one of the Justice Democrats who don't take corporate PAC money. So Look, to be honest, I'm actually impressed on how well she did, even though she lost. So she actually got about 30% of the vote. And for somebody with no name recognition, never ran before, no media coverage, because there's absolutely a blackout when it came to corporate media. Nobody who's ever talked about West Virginia on mainstream media ever brought up his primary challenger. And look, there's a reason for that. Mainstream media loves Joe Manchin. You know why? Well, he's bipartisan. Because he'll vote with Trump on some issues. Look, this is the rare bipartisan Democrat. No, he's more of a Republican, and he loves the right wing. He loves voting for deregulation of the banks. So, man, it's disaster. But nonetheless, Paula Jean, for all the disadvantages that she had, to pull out 30%, not bad. That could have been a lot worse. It could have been like, as I mentioned before, Kucinich, because that was disastrous. And of course, there are so many different smears against Kucinich. One of them was, of course, the fact that he didn't get along with the business community when he was when he was mayor, and they basically bankrupted the town and blamed him. It's because he wouldn't play ball with the establishment. So, and he could never get away from being blamed for that, which again, it wasn't his fault, but nonetheless, disastrous race in Ohio. But primary season is not close to being over. Sometimes we're going to lose. Immediately, it doesn't, we're not going to win every race. But that's no reason to give up. So, and I think that Paula Jean running such a great race, I hope she's not done with her political career. I hope she continues to fight. And I hope she continues to gain notoriety on the issue, and to bring attention to the issues facing West Virginians and people in other communities that don't have clean water and that have issues with non-representation, like from people like Joe Manchin. So, anyway, let's get into the stories. So, first, let's get into one of our Trump stories for the day. Okay. Now, President Trump and the press, they don't have a very good working relationship. They don't have any relationship at all. Donald Trump secretly wants to be loved by the press, and since he's an idiot, since he's a monster, the press doesn't like him. Okay, so now that we've established that, Trump has apparently threatened again to take away press credentials over what he deems to be unfair coverage. Now, to him, unfair coverage is anything that he doesn't like, anything that happens to be remotely negative. And to be fair, the press is incredibly negative on him, but there are good reasons. For number one, he lies all the time. He lies to everyone's face. So if you want to be critical about him, critical of him on that, well, that's perfectly acceptable. That's perfectly fine. But he, as I said before, trying to threaten the press into not being so negative. In fact, he tweeted earlier, "The fake news is working overtime. Just reported that despite the tremendous success that we're having with the economy and all things else." Tremendous success? Job growth is actually below expectations. Just saying. 91% of the network news is about me is negative, fake. Why do we work so hard in working with the media when it is corrupt? Take away credentials? Okay, look. So here's the thing. Now, is the media corrupt? I believe it is. So I'm critical of the media. I know they're corrupt. Not because they're mean to Donald Trump. No, there are other reasons that I believe the media is corrupt. But see, when it comes to Trump, all he thinks about is, well, it's fake because it's bad for me. I think that I'm awesome. Everything I do is great. So they must be lying. They must be making things up about me to go after me. But that's not true. It's actually 100% ridiculous. No, the reason that the media is corrupt, that I actually agree in principle that it's corrupt, is the fact that it wants access to politicians. And when you prioritize access to politicians over telling the truth, then you're not actually holding your elected officials accountable. So, I mean, look, to be fair, they're doing a little bit better of a job on Trump. However, I think they could do a lot better. And I think one of the main problems when it comes to politics and how they cover politics in general is that they're always worried about decorum. And for that, I go back to Michelle Wolf, right? Now, remember when Michelle Wolf, did her bit at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and the media absolutely had a meltdown. Oh my God, I can't believe how far you went. She went too far. She gave Trump a win, blah, 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 right? No, Michelle Wolf went exactly where she needed to go. Everything that she said was 100% spot on. But the problem was not what she said, for the most part. No, the problem is how she said it. She broke decorum. She was rude. She was so incredibly rude. How dare you imply that Kellyanne Conway and Sarah Huckabee Sanders are liars? Oh my God, you're attacking women. Ridiculous, right? Now, the reason that she says Sarah Huckabee Sanders is lying is because that's exactly what she does. That's her job. She is paid to go out and lie to the American people on behalf of the Trump administration. But however, when you call that out, when you say that so-and-so is lying, when it's clear that they're clear that they're not telling the truth, well, that's a breach of decorum. How dare you? How dare you? Well, all right. Now, see, that's why people hate cable news. Because all the American people want is for somebody to tell them the truth, to be honest with them. But see, cable news, they can't do that because then they lose access to the politicians. If you dare hold a politician accountable, they're not going to come back on your show. So, you know what? Look, a lot of people are taking this story and they're like, Trump is attacking the First Amendment. There's nothing in the First Amendment that says that politicians and the media and that the media should have special access to politicians. That's what this is. That's what this is about. That's what press credentials is about. It's just about you getting special access to politicians and political functions. That has nothing to do with your ability to report on President Trump or on what any politician is actually doing. This is special access. I don't have press credentials. That's why I can be honest. I mean, I've always chosen to be honest with you guys because I don't care about getting access to politicians or access to their campaigns. That's not necessary to hold them accountable. So it's not an attack specifically on the First Amendment. Yes, when you do go after the press, you are attacking the First Amendment. And I'm completely against going after the press, calling them or saying that they are the enemy of the people. That's going way too far. If you want to call the press dishonest, yeah, maybe. I don't think they're making things up to go and attack specific politicians. But look, then again, there are hatchet jobs. There's spin, there's opinion, etc. It goes a little bit. You can go into detail about some of those different things, but generally, the idea of a free press is a fantastic thing, and I completely support that. Nonetheless, they don't need credentials, okay? So I'm actually with Trump. Go ahead and take their credentials. Strip them all. Maybe then they might actually do their job. And that's what I want them to do. I actually want to hold all politicians accountable, Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. The President of the United States especially. Let's hold them all accountable. And let's let Trump go and talk to the sycophants at Fox News. Whatever. And look, he's starting to even lose Fox News. I've showed you a couple of examples of that. But the whole point is, why do they need special access? Why do they need things like the White House Correspondents' Dinner? They don't. The media and the politicians are too chummy to begin with. So maybe if you strip their access, then they might actually start to hold people accountable like they're supposed to be the watchdogs of the government instead of the lapdogs. So, okay. So, okay. Before I get into the next story, which is a good news story, where I actually give Trump some credit, I want to read a super chat here. Carlos Avocado reads, "Good day, Jeff. Keep up the good fight." Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you too. I mean, have a good day, and thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of the show. If you guys want to help out, you can also send a super chat as well. All right, everybody. Let's move on. All right. So there's some good news here in the lead up to negotiations with North Korea. It is being reported that 3 American hostages have now been released by the North Korean regime. Recently, it was revealed that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had made another surprise trip to North Korea for a little bit more negotiation and to prepare for some eventual talks between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Now, it's being reported in the lead-up, the hostages, Tony Kim, Kim Hak-song, and Kim Dong-chul, have been released and are flying home with Mike Pompeo. Now, it's important to note that all 3 of them happen to be Christians. And why do I think that's important to note? Well, because if you evangelize in North Korea, you're going to get arrested. So religion, of course, is outlawed. I disagree with that. I think you should have whatever religion that you want. But they don't have the same kind of freedom of religion laws that we do here. So I think that might have to do with a little bit with at least some of their arrests. So, and it also might have to do with the idea that Trump is very invested in getting these people back. But nonetheless, this is still good news. I'm still glad that they are coming back home. Now, according to Vox, last week, the North Korean government transferred the Americans from the labor camps where they were being held to a hotel near Pyongyang. Then, late on Tuesday night, Kim had authorized their official release and had handed them over to U.S. custody. Trump finally tweeted about this earlier this morning. He said, "I'm pleased to inform you that Secretary of State Pompeo is in the air and on his way back from North Korea with the 3 wonderful gentlemen that everyone is looking so forward to meeting. They seem to be in good health. Also, good meeting with Kim Jong-un. Date and place set." So it says, as I said before, good news, right? It's rare good news. Credit to Pompeo, and believe me, I hardly give credit to people like that. So yes, that shows how much of a positive development this is. Now, of course, they don't get all the credit, 100% of the credit, but a good amount of it does go to them. Actually, more credit goes to, I think, the warming relationship between North and South Korea, something that we really didn't have much to do with, to be honest with you. Nonetheless, we're taking advantage of the warming of relations, and that generally is a good thing. Now, more details. Now, back in March, North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho traveled to Sweden to discuss releasing these hostages. And over Easter weekend, then CIA Director Pompeo spoke personally with Kim Jong-un about the detainees. So, I want to talk about North Korea and why they're interested in doing this. Apparently, in the lead-ups to the talks, they are showing a little bit of goodwill because I think they actually do want some of these talks to work, because it's advantageous for North Korea to not be as strangled by U.S. sanctions and our military presence in South Korea. So all that stuff, I think, makes them a little bit more receptive. So I think this is more of a goodwill kind of thing. And it's much better than the last goodwill, which was Otto Warmbier. That did not turn out well because later on, after being subjected to who knows what, Warmbier ended up dying from these injuries. So, and what he had sustained being in North Korea. Now, experts, of course, say that releasing the 3 Americans is a good sign that North Korea wants a good meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un and a peaceful resolution of the nuclear and other issues with North Korea. This is according to Joseph Detrani, a former intelligence official who previously negotiated peace talks with North Korea. Now, I'm hoping that these 3 gentlemen are in good health. As I said before, the conditions inside these North Korean labor camps and prisons is absolutely horrific. And that, as I said before, is probably what contributed to the death of Otto Warmbier. So if this ends up differently, then I think that's a good sign for diplomacy. I actually care about diplomacy. I actually want us to use diplomacy. I actually wish that we could have done that with Iran instead of pulling out of the deal, which I think was a disastrous move, and that's going to set us back massively. Nonetheless, I think in this case, the Trump administration does deserve to get credit for helping to facilitate the release of of hostages. They've actually had a better record on that than the Obama administration. Here's a couple of examples. The Trump administration worked with Egypt to release Aya Hijazi, an Egyptian aid worker from captivity back in 2017. And in October, Trump announced the release of Caitlin Coleman, her husband, and 3 children that they bore in captivity that lasted 5 years. So that's just a couple of examples. That's good for the hostages. It's good for families. And, of course, it's obviously good for Donald Trump. So I think he can take this win. Credit where credit is due. Let's hope that this leads to more positive news regarding North Korea. Although, with us pulling out of the Iran deal, I think that might complicate matters. Because now, who's going to trust our word as a country? But nonetheless, I don't know. We'll see if this meeting with Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump turns out to be any good. If we get some sort of positive news from that. I hope so, because at the end of the day, I'm in favor of diplomacy. And if Trump's going to do diplomacy and is going to go that route instead of going the route of war, then I guess, well, I don't guess, that's a good thing. Okay. Let's move on here. And let's go to Gina Haspel. So today, Gina Haspel is facing... Well, let me start that again. So Gina Haspel is a CIA agent that has been nominated to become the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, she's been nominated by President Trump, and now she's facing a confirmation hearing. Now, she's a controversial choice, to say the least, because it turns out she had presided over a CIA torture program. And also, she had destroyed evidence of torture. So, look, that's a bit of a problem, right? So, with that hanging over her head, of course, a lot of Democrats on the committee are like, hey, what is your stance on torture? Are you going to do torture again if you become head of the CIA? What's going to happen? In fact, she told members of the Senate Intelligence Committee that she's committed to not restarting those programs. Quote, "We're not getting back into that business. I would not restart under any circumstances an interrogation program at the CIA." She also said, "I would also not allow the CIA to undertake activity that is immoral, even if it's technically legal. I would absolutely not permit it. I believe the CIA must undertake activities that are consistent with American values." Now, oh, look at that. She's talking a good game. Except that you have to understand that the CIA has really never been consistent with American values. The CIA is a spy organization. They lie, and then they cover up lies, and then they also are involved in plots to overthrow governments like the government of Iran. So, excuse me if I don't really trust the CIA or Haspel or her moral compass. And let me give you an example of why. Now, when senators asked her whether she believed it was morally wrong for her agency to use what was called enhanced interrogation, what is actually called torture, on terrorist suspects, that includes waterboarding, which is basically a simulation of drowning, she said that those techniques, and she defended this by saying, look, it was legal at the time. So President George W. Bush said it was okay to waterboard people, and it was legal across the board, so we used it. Oh, well. Well, here's the thing about that. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's legal by American standards. It's a violation of international law. It's a violation of the Geneva Convention. It's actually illegal under our own laws. And yet for some reason Bush is like, no, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and use that advanced interrogation. We can go get those secrets, and then we can get the terrorists. Well, again, that's illegal, and for one, and for two, it doesn't actually work. Okay? But see, Haspel won't admit that it's wrong, and she also won't admit that it didn't work. In fact, she told Kamala Harris when she pressed Haspel on this, quote, "We got valuable information from debriefing of Al-Qaeda detainees. I don't think it's knowable whether interrogation techniques played a role in that intelligence." So, wait a minute. If you didn't know it was effective, then why do it? Well, I mean, look, those are my orders. I got it from George W. Bush. He said it was okay, so we used, quote-unquote, enhanced interrogation, a.k.a. torture, to try and get intelligence, even though we weren't sure that it worked. Look, they can't answer why. They can't answer why. But here's the thing. We know that torture isn't effective. In fact, back in 2014, the Senate issued a report on the CIA's detention and interrogation program. Here's what it said. CIA detainees subjected to what were then called enhanced interrogation techniques either produced no intelligence or they fabricated information, resulting in faulty intelligence. It says that the CIA's own interrogators assessed the most effective method for acquiring intelligence from detainees, including from detainees the CIA considered to be the most high value was to confront the detainees with information already acquired by the intelligence community. So here we have proof that torture doesn't work. And yet she can't say that interrogation techniques played any role in the information that they had gathered. She could just be honest and say, no, it didn't work. That's why I'm not going to do it anymore. But she can't go and say that. Gee, I wonder why. Look, now the next question here that she got from the Senate is, would you torture someone if Donald Trump had asked you to? Now that's an important question, right? Because for one, she had done so under the Bush administration. So it's a fair question. It's also a fair question and relevant now because President Trump has said, let's torture people. Yeah, I know it doesn't work. I don't care. Let's torture people. Let's bring back waterboarding and a hell of a lot worse. That's a quote. Donald Trump has said that many times in his rallies. He does not care if torture doesn't work because it's not about getting intelligence. It's about torturing another human being because they can. But okay, that human being just happens to be somebody who's brown and therefore, we don't like those people. So, now, okay, what was their answer for that, by the way? Haspel told senators that she doubted the president would ever ask her to waterboard a suspect. Again, that's ridiculous, as I just pointed out. That is something that Donald Trump has said that he's more than happy to do. That he wants to do. Yeah, let's torture more. That's what he said. So, but nonetheless, she said that experience had shown that the CIA is not the right place to conduct interrogations, as it does not have the proper expertise. So her answer was, I don't think Donald Trump would ever ask me to do so, and if he did, I'd just refer him to another agency because we're not set up for it. That's the moral compass of Gina Haspel. This does not inspire any sort of confidence in her promise not to torture people. She is clearly not fit to lead the CIA based on what she's done. She has followed basically what are illegal orders from torturers and then helped destroy evidence of that torture. She destroyed 92 videotapes, all depicting one detainee being tortured. And you know what? She still supports that decision to this day. She just admitted it. I destroyed the tapes, and I supported the decision to destroy the tapes. I was ordered to destroy evidence, and I did so willingly, and I would do it again. So excuse me if I don't take Haspel at her word. Excuse me if I don't think that she's qualified for this. She followed bad orders, illegal orders. She did war crimes, covered up torture, and she would probably end up doing it so again. Gina Haspel should not be confirmed. Gina Haspel, along with all the others who ran the torture program, should be in prison. Lock her up. Lock her up. Don't confirm her. Lock her up. Because that is where she belongs. Round the nation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Round the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share on YouTube, Facebook, wherever. Wherever you're watching, if there's a like button, there's a share button, please hit that. And I thank you very much for doing so. All right. So another way to help the show, patreon.com/TYTNation. Also, please use the super chat as well. So thank you to all those who have done so. All right. Now, let's move forward. We do have a Stormy Daniels story. Yes, I know. But this is important, I think, because it shows corruption. And there is a deep well of corruption inside the Trump administration. So let's do that. Let's talk about that. Okay. That here, and so there's big news coming out of the investigation into Michael Cohen in relation to the shell company he used to pay off Stormy Daniels. So there's been a lot of talk about that shell company and that $130,000 payment. Now, it turns out that that's not the only shady thing that company was involved in. Apparently, it had received payments from companies linked to a Russian oligarch as well. And I think this is the big story here. Several corporations with business that happens to be before the Trump administration. So corporations that have business with the Trump administration, whether it be regulatory, etc., happen to also donate to this shell corporation connected to Michael Cohen. How very interesting. It must be a coincidence, right? Now, well, let's get into the records. Let's find out. Financial records reviewed by the New York Times show that Mr. Cohen used a shell company called Essential Consultants LLC for an array of business activities that went far beyond what was publicly known. In fact, this company was hardly known. So it was supposed to be, at least the way that they talked about it originally, a company that's really only known by a few people. Michael Cohen, of course, not known by President Trump or not known by anybody, and used to dispense secret payments to to sex workers or porn stars. Well, somehow it's well known enough to have received large amounts of money from different American corporations. Fascinating. Now, these payments, including $4.4 million worth of payments from different companies, flowed through Essential Consultants, starting shortly before Mr. Trump was elected president and continued up until January. So the payments, of course, went through a shell company from various different sources. I'm going to go to some of those sources. Now, the New York Times explains, among the previously underreported transactions were payments last year of about $500,000 from a company called Columbus Nova. Now, that's an investment firm in New York whose biggest client is a company controlled by Viktor Vekselberg, who is a Russian oligarch. So that's what most of the media who's covering this story is talking about. Oh, my God, here's the Russian connection, right? Okay, yeah, I guess that's important to point out as it relates to the Mueller investigation. Now, a lawyer for Columbus Nova, in a statement on Tuesday, described this money as a consulting fee that had nothing to do with Mr. Vekselberg. And in fact, Vekselberg is basically, in the article later on, he claimed that he didn't know and that he's not really under investigation, even though Mueller had previously talked to him. So the important thing here is they claim to be a consulting firm, right? No, see, the shell company, which, we know is a shell company, Essential Consultants, it's got consulting in the name. So it's a consultant agency. Okay, well, that's interesting. Especially when you look at some of the other transactions that went through this company. Now, they include hundreds of thousands of dollars Cohen received from Fortune 500 companies with business that happened to be before the Trump administration, as well as other payments made, like the one made to Daniels. Now, if you're a consulting firm, you're not paying off porn stars. So that seems a little shady, okay? And also, look at the weird coincidence with some of these companies that have business with the Trump administration on big decisions. Now, let me give you some examples of those, right? Now, Mr. Cohen used the company to collect $250,000 after arranging payments in 2017 and 2018 by a major Republican donor, Elliot Brody, to a former Playboy model he allegedly impregnated. So that goes back to, why is a consulting firm paying out this kind of money and taking these kinds of donations? That's weird. Now, among other payments, were for $99,980 each between October and January by Novartis Investments, as a subsidiary of Novartis, which is a multinational pharmaceutical giant based in Switzerland. Now, Novartis, whose chief executive was among 15 business leaders invited to dinner with Mr. Trump at the World Economic Forum in January, spent more than $10 million lobbying in Washington, and frequently seeks approvals from federal drug regulators. So, oh, look, Novartis paying this shell company that happens to have connections with the Trump administration. But wait, I thought the shell company was supposed to be quiet, that nobody was supposed to know about this except for Cohen and the few people who had gotten payments from the shell company. Isn't it weird how every big corporation that has business with the Trump administration happens to know about this LLC? Weird. Super weird. Another example. Korea Aerospace Industries had paid Mr. Cohen's company $150,000 last November. The company, an aircraft manufacturer, has teamed up with Lockheed Martin in competing for a multi-billion-dollar contract to provide trainer jets for the U.S. Air Force that is expected to be awarded this year. AT&T also made 4 payments totaling $200,000 between October of 2017 and January of 2018. According to the documents, AT&T, whose proposed merger with Time Warner, is having to be pending before the Justice Department. They issued a statement on Tuesday evening confirming that it made payments to Mr. Cohen's firm. Now, AT&T is also a big opponent of net neutrality, so to be fair. So, now what do we get from this? It's not a coincidence. This is companies funneling money through this other company, this shell company, right into the pockets of Donald Trump. This is paying for access and influence in the administration. Now, look, yesterday, and I didn't connect the dots until earlier today, but Michael Avenatti, that's Stormy Daniels' lawyer, who actually helped release these documents, okay? He asked a question of Sam Nunberg recently. And he asked, do you believe Michael Cohen is selling access to the president? Now, I thought, well, that's a good question, but where is it coming from? What does it have to do with Stormy Daniels? What does it have to do with any of this stuff that you're actually talking about? Well, we have the answer now. In these documents, where this company appears to be a funnel to where other companies or to where Cohen can sell access to the president to giant corporations. That's not a coincidence. That is corruption. Now, the most damning thing is that this corruption might actually still be illegal. And right now, the legal details of this are a bit murky. So, and it depends on what they spent the money for and what they collected. So, but here's the thing. They called themselves a consulting firm, but there was no consulting. In fact, this isn't even a real company. It's a fake company. Essential Consultants has no website, no employees, and really only exists on paper. Now, if it has no public face, then how do these companies happen to find this shell company? That's the other question. But we already know the answer to that. Michael Cohen was definitely selling access to Trump through this company. So he would go to all these different companies, and this is my speculation here, based on what I know, and say, hey, look, man, you got business for the Trump administration? Why don't you make a donation? Just make a donation, and we'll chalk it up as a consulting fee, and then, well, we'll spread your message to the president. That's what this is about. This is an absolutely shady company, and we can see what this is all for. This is corruption. This seems to be legalized corruption, as far as we know. And just another example of how much of the swamp this administration actually is. So if you had any doubts before, it should be gone now. Okay. All right. So now we go to a disturbing story out of Illinois. Okay. Illinois police have a message. Keep pot illegal or the dog gets it. Yeah. I'm not kidding either. Illinois right now is debating whether or not to become the 10th state to legalize recreational marijuana. And the cops are not happy about this. Now, they're claiming that if the state goes ahead and legalizes pot, that their dogs, the canine force, will no longer be useful, and therefore they're going to have to be put down. So they're essentially threatening all the police dogs in the state. Don't legalize pot, or we're going to have to kill the dogs. That's insanity. Now, Macon County Sheriff Howard Buffett said, quote, "The biggest thing for law enforcement is you're going to have to replace all your dogs. So to me, it's a giant step forward for drug dealers, and it's a giant step backwards for law enforcement and the residents of the community." Now, Howard Buffett happens to be a middle child of Warren Buffett, which is interesting. And he has a private foundation that paid $2.2 million to support canine units in 33 counties across Illinois. So that's a little background on who this guy is, and apparently why he supports keeping marijuana illegal, because he has a big investment in these dogs. So what the argument here is basically, look, we got these dogs, we train them to sniff out drugs, and if you legalize drugs, then the dogs aren't going to be useful anymore. We can't retrain the dogs. I mean, we could, but it just happens to be super expensive, right? Impossibly expensive. So, well, we can't do that. And of course, they're police dogs, so they're unsuitable for adoption, which means we're going to have to euthanize dogs. We're going to have to kill the dogs. So if you don't want the dogs to die, then you're going to have to keep pot illegal. And don't you dare legalize recreational marijuana. Now, there's a few holes in that argument. For one, they can still smell other drugs. They're not just trained to smell just marijuana. So, yes, you could retrain the dogs, and I'm going to get to why that's actually probably a better option than, well, obviously a better option than killing them. So, nonetheless, let me address his argument first. He says this will help drug dealers. Actually, it's been shown that when you legalize and regulate, that the drug dealers happen to suffer, right? When it's legal, they lose business, the black market loses business, and citizens end up winning out. So, and look, taxpayers also win. There's less people being put in jail. That saves more money. And of course, there's less money that ends up being spent on law enforcement to begin with. Well, that's actually great for the citizens. It's terrible for the drug dealers, but it's also terrible for the cops. But I'll get into that later. Now, as far as the dogs go, right? Well, again, what are you going to do with the dogs? Well, we already have an example of what happens to the dogs in the different states that have already legalized cannabis. They haven't had to have mass euthanizations of dogs. In the 9 states that have already legalized marijuana, I have not heard of any police dogs being put down. So this seems to be a pretty disingenuous argument. They must have either retrained them or homed them out. Or hell, the officers that they bond with, if they want them, they could also probably take them home. So there are things that you can do other than just put them down, which is needlessly cruel. And again, it's very transparent what they seem to be doing. They seem to be trying to guilt people into keeping an unjust system. Now, here's the other thing, right? They say it's prohibitively expensive. Well, with the money that they'll save from no longer having to enforce these drug laws, they could probably afford to put these dogs in a nice place or retrain them. In fact, the Chicago Reader estimated that in 2010, Cook County alone spent more than $78 million arresting and prosecuting people for possession of marijuana. That's it. $78 million. They could use that money to retrain the dogs or put them in a nice home. But see, that's the thing. That's not the real issue here. The issue here is basically they're trying to use these dogs who, look, people love dogs. I'm not necessarily a dog person, but I still like dogs. I just don't have one. They're using them as a way to justify the continued incarceration of human beings over a harmless drug. They want to continue the drug war. And look, the reason they want to continue the drug war is because of money. It's about the money. You got to follow the money. Look, one of the ways that they get money from this is civil asset forfeiture. So what happens with civil asset forfeiture? Well, if a cop believes that, a house or a car or whatever, or money has anything to do with drugs, well, they can take it. They can take your house. They can take your car. They can take whatever the hell they want. So that's legalized theft by the state. So that's something progressives and Republicans, conservatives, can get together on. We both hate that kind of big government. Get out of our lives and stop stealing our property. So, but the reason that the cops love it is again, they take the stuff, they keep the money, and then they sell the things for money. That goes back into the department. Sometimes it gets used on vehicles, for example, MRAPs and Bearcats and whatever, which I'm sure that town of 1,000 residents needs a fucking MRAP that's mine resistant. But look, other than ridiculous equipment, it also goes to normal things like couches and televisions. So they have an incentive, a monetary incentive, to keep drugs illegal. Now, how it ties to the dogs is, well, the dogs can detect the drugs or traces or residue from drugs that is under the legal limit, and that can give the police an incentive and the ability, the legal authority and justification to go and take people's stuff through civil asset forfeiture. So, and look, this goes actually back to the training of the dogs as well. In 2011, the Chicago Tribune published a review of drug dog searches conducted over 3 years by police departments in the Chicago suburbs. Just 44% of dog alerts led to the discovery of actual contraband. So, and let me tie that into how that's related with the training in case you're wondering why. But first, so less than 50% of the time, dogs actually find contraband. So most of the time, they actually find drug residue. But, of course, that's enough for the cops to use probable cause. Now, there's an academic study on the issue that also shown that drug dogs are far more likely to merely confirm hunches and suspicions of their handlers than they are to independently detect illicit drugs. Now, as I said before, this is dogs are accurate about 44% of the time. That's less than a coin flip. Now, this benefits the police, however, because it gives them probable cause for searches. These dogs could be trained to actually detect larger quantities of drugs. But the cops, since they get rich off probable cause, their departments get money through that civil asset forfeiture, and their continued presence is justified by the continuance of the drug war. Then they make sure to train these dogs to only pick up, or to try to pick up more residue, which they're not quite as good at. So that's the whole point here. More searches mean more opportunities for arrests, of course, or even more false positives on drugs, where you do find residue, but not necessarily any amount that is illegal. Then that means you have more opportunities to either arrest someone or to seize people's assets. And the thing about this is that it's very, very difficult to get your stuff back once it has been seized by police. So that's another thing. Oftentimes, actually all the time, it is dependent on the person who has had their stuff stolen, their property taken by police, to get legal representation and to fight to be able to get it back. So all the legal fees and things are on them. Well, if you have a $3,500 car, not really worth too much, but still decently, it's still look, it's more expensive than the car that I own. Okay. It's twice as expensive as the car that I own. If my car was taken by the cops and I had to hire a lawyer and go through all this legal bullshit to get it back, it wouldn't be worth it. So in a lot of cases, they do stuff like this. They take somebody's car and then they sell it at auction, and they just pocket the profit. It is legal theft. So, as I said before, they have a big incentive to continue this, right? Now, there's another incentive, and I mentioned that before. It's jobs. There's a lot of jobs tied up in enforcing the drug war, especially against marijuana. You've got canine cops, for example, drug task force, narcotics detectives, and all these different things that are tied up in specifically going after drugs. So we have right now a system that has monetary incentives put around putting people in jail over a plant. And of course, like anyone else, they'll do whatever they can to protect the revenue stream, which means even going so low as to threaten the lives of these animals. It is a sick system. It is a gross system. And it's something that we need to eliminate. We need to change this system. We need to legalize the drugs. And, we need to go and give these dogs a good home. Okay. I think that's fairly clear. All right, let's go to the last story here. So this is a big development in the protection of net neutrality. Senate Democrats today are officially filing a petition to force a net neutrality vote under the Congressional Review Act. Now, this vote today is to push something called a resolution of disapproval. Now, what does that mean? What is the Congressional Review Act? Oh, real quick. The CRA allows Congress to review and reject administrative decisions by federal agencies. Now, throughout the Trump administration so far, Republicans have used the CRA to eliminate Obama rules on climate change, for example. Now, in this case, the Democrats are actually doing something positive they're using the CRA to do something positive, and that is to overturn the FCC's repeal of net neutrality rules. Now, obviously, that would bring back the net neutrality rules would actually make it harder for the agency to attempt to eliminate those rules again. So that is excellent. Now, the resolution does need approval of a simple majority, so you don't have to worry about a filibuster. And because of Senator John McCain's absence, due to his aggressive form of brain cancer, the CRA believes, supporters of the CRA believe that they have enough votes. They need 51 votes, a simple majority. Now, there's all the Democrats are in favor of this. You also have two independents, Bernie Sanders, of course, Angus King. And you also have Senator Suzanne Collins, the rare Republican that's like, you know what? It turns out net neutrality kind of important. Now, yes, if it gets past the Senate, that's great. However, it's very unlikely to move further from that because the House is still under Republican control, and it likely will not win the House because most of the Republicans are unfortunately bought by big corporations. Now, even if it were to go through the House, which, as I said, is very unlikely, it would then have to go to Donald Trump. Now, you could do a congressional override on that veto, but again, that seems very, very unlikely. So this, I think, is pretty much DOA. Nonetheless, what's the point of doing this, you might ask? Okay, well, let me answer that question. According to Reuters, Democrats believe that this issue would be big in the midterm elections, especially among younger internet-savvy voters. So the reason they're doing this is basically politics. They're playing politics. They're saying, look at us. We care so much about net neutrality. Please vote for us. And you know what? I'm actually okay with that. I know that's weird, but look, yes, is it a cynical ploy to go and get votes? Yes. But guess what? You're actually doing something. Or at least attempting to do something. And this is a popular issue, right? And look, Democrats know it's a popular issue. They can look at polls just as much as anyone else. I just wish that the Democrats would actually run on other popular issues. For example, Medicare for all and a $15 minimum wage. But hey, whatever, right? So, yes, I can't help but feel that this is more self-serving than anything. But if you do vote the right way when it counts, then I guess you're actually doing your job representing the people. So if there is such a blue wave that happens, and I hope it does, but a good kind of blue wave where we actually get progressives, then I hope that there will be enough votes then to be able to restore net neutrality rules. If not, well, then I worry about the future of the internet, and I worry about the future of not only shows like mine, but basically independent media as a whole, as well as everything else that depends on a free and open internet. So now there is one more hope here that this vote will do, and I hope that it will bring more attention to this issue. This issue is incredibly important. It has a lot to do with free speech. It has a lot to do with things being treated equally on the internet. It has a lot to do with business. And so I hope that this will engage more people to be involved in trying to restore net neutrality rules. And hopefully the politicians that end up winning later, if they do, will do the right thing and restore these protections and enshrine them into law permanently. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for tuning in to the show. Appreciate it. Thank you for the super chats that I got earlier, or the one super chat I got earlier. Make sure to like and share if you haven't already. If you're a new viewer, please subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/TYTNation. That helps us out a great deal. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/TYTNation. That also helps us greatly. That's how we can continue to do the show. So Thank you for everybody who has done that as well and supports us in every other way. So thank you. All right, everybody. I'm out of here. Hopefully you have a good afternoon. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. See you all tomorrow.